these police officers came into the library. They were like, "Are you Gabe Kea?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I went outside, and they're like, "You might want to sit down." I remember them saying, like, "You might want to sit down." I'm like, I think you guys scared me enough already. Why don't you just tell me what's going on?
When was the moment that you realized this is funny?
That's when the performance and the writing kind of comes together, you know? And for me, that's a lot of my process and that's why I still do open mics, because I need to have that assurance of like, oh, I think this is funny, but I still don't even know until I do it. It's just like, I've got stuff in my head, new stuff, right? That's all my new stuff. And I'm like, I don't know if any of that's funny. So am I just going to go out there and do it and just like, have the confidence in myself that this is going to be funny?
You can't laugh at that.
Welcome to You Can't Laugh at That, the podcast where we take topics you can't laugh at and we find ways to laugh at them in the never-ending quest to prove that anything can be funny. Today, Steve Mers is back and better than ever, although he might have COVID. What's up, Steve?
It's my temperature.
With us today is our guest, is Cincinnati-based comedian. He is from Canada originally and has performed at all kinds of comedy festivals, Limestone Comedy Festival, Gilda's Laugh Fest, Laughing Skull Comedy Festival. He's opened for Nikki Glaser and Bert Kreischer and Dave Chappelle. He is on Bob and Tom quite a bit, and he just released an album called Dumber Than a Fish, where you can find it on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, Apple Music. Welcome to the podcast, Gabe.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And he actually has COVID, so. Yes,
I'm in the middle. I'm in day 5 or 6 of COVID right now. So, yay.
He's actually on a ventilator as we speak.
Just proving I'm more American than Canadian right now.
Yeah, this is like the 3 degrees of COVID. Has had it, might have it, definitely has it.
Definitely has it.
That's America right now. You're one of those 3 people. So times are great.
At all.
Today we're going to talk about even better times. We're going to talk about Gabe's bit about getting arrested and kind of find the funny in that, which most people who get arrested while they're getting arrested aren't like, hey, this is hilarious. So we'll unpeel that onion and go from there. Gabe, we're just going to dive right into your bit. If you want to introduce the clip.
All right. This is a DUI story about getting arrested for drinking and driving, which is a great joke to tell to a bunch of people that are about to drink and drive before they go home, right? But it's got a good ending because I don't know. I don't know if it has a good ending or if it has a good moral to it. But don't drink and drive is basically the moral of this joke. You don't drink and drive.
This podcast episode is brought to you by Dare and.
I got a DUI when I was in my early 20s, worst possible place. I was at a sobriety checkpoint, and I did the worst thing you could do at a sobriety check. I passed out at the sobriety check. You haven't been to one, that's the worst start you could possibly have. I'm sitting in my car, taking a nap on my steering wheel, right? Officer comes up, knocks on my window. I'm like, 2 drinks. I'm ready with my... Got my story locked and loaded. That's when he asked me, he said, "Sir, do you know why I'm talking to you here tonight?" And I was like, "Sobriety check. You need me to get out, walk in a straight line? I can do it." And that's when he told me, "No, actually, me and my partner had this guy pulled over on the side of the road, and you pulled up behind us." That was when I realized I just made my own sobriety check. Right? That is a DIY DUI right there. My least favorite part of the arrest process is when they fingerprint you. If you haven't been arrested before, you don't know what I'm talking about. This is like, it's not what you see in the movies. They don't have some like high-tech scanner when you walk into the precinct and you're like, beep, boop, bop, bop. No, what happens is you go into this police station and there's just a cop that's been waiting there in front of an ink pad like all day long, drinking Red Bull since 8 a.m., right? He's like all jacked up. He's like, I'm the fingy cop. Come on. He grabs your finger. He rolls your finger on this ink pad so hard. You can feel the aggression from his childhood coming out as he's rolling your. He's like, my daddy never hugged me when I was little. I always wanted to be a pro wrestler. I can't maintain eye contact during intercourse. I'm like, oh, all right. TMI on that third one. I like telling that joke, just like a lot of these jokes. So there's muscle memory involved with comedy. Sometimes you're at a comedy show, you're at a concert, and you hear that song, and that song it'll pop back into your head if you're in the right situation. It's the same thing with comedy, right? Say someone from this room gets arrested a couple months in the future, you're blackout drunk, you don't remember anything. All of a sudden, that cop squeezes the shit out of your finger, rolls it on that ink pad. You wake up, start cracking up, thinking about this. That cop's like, what's so funny down there? And you're like, you can't look your lover in the eye.
All right.
Just have a moment with the man in uniform where he's like, it's a power thing.
You can't look your lover in the eye. That's so funny, man. All right. So take us through the conception of that bit, starting with the sobriety checkpoint.
The sobriety checkpoint joke is like kind of, I live in Cincinnati now. I started out in St. Louis, Missouri. That's where I'm originally from. I've been doing that joke for at least 15 years, probably. It's like one of my favorite jokes and one of my better jokes, just because it's kind of the classic switch, like where you think it's going one way and then it totally diverts to a different direction. So you take the audience kind of on a ride from thinking that you're passed out at a sobriety checkpoint to actually you just pulled up behind a cop because you're so drunk that you thought the lights were a sobriety checkpoint and you pulled in behind them. So that story did not happen to me. It's not a true life story. It is a true life story of like a former roommate of mine had that happen to him, where he pulled up behind a cop and like fell asleep behind the cop. And this was like probably the story was well before I was even doing stand-up. So it was probably like before 2001, pre 9/11. That, like, you know, when DUIs, they're like, well, yeah, we'll walk it off, go home. Because the story was that it was my old roommate. He pulled up behind this cop and they found him drunk, but then he was right in front of his house. So they like let him go. They didn't even give him a DUI in that situation. But I just remember hearing that story and thinking like that's, and then I just wrote that joke from it, was the idea that you pull up behind a bunch of lights and then, you know, switch and it's, oh, you're under arrest. So that's where that story comes from. And then it's changed. It's changed a little bit as you go throughout the years and you're doing a joke over and over again. You might add some stuff, take some stuff away. I know when I hear that 2 drinks part, it's like I've had comics tell me, like, a friend of mine, this comic, was like, don't do that 2 drinks. That's just so, it's like everybody says 2 drinks. It's like, it's too hacky. It's like everybody, but then I'm like, that's kind of why it is hacky, because that's what you say when you get pulled over. You say the hackiest shit ever is
Right.
like, yeah, what you do, officer? Like, why wouldn't you say 1? It's like, sounds so much better than 2, but 2 sounds like you had a bunch, but you're, so I remember someone telling me to like take that out there. And as I'm listening to it, I'm like, when I'm listening to it, I'm like, that comic's probably right. I should have taken that out. But, and then the line at the end, the DIY part, was given to me by another comedian friend of mine, John Schreck, who's from here in Cincinnati. He moved to Atlanta just a few months ago, actually. And he gave me that line, and it really like it. A lot of my jokes have either either a tag or a line or something that another comedian gave me. And it's not like it's just like a constructive thing comedians do after a show. Like sometimes you come up and you give someone a tag or you get a tag and you're like, thanks. And you're like, I'm never going to use that, but I appreciate you thinking of me, you know?
Yeah.
But I always remember every joke like that has a tag that like really works. Same thing with that DUI joke. John Schreck gave that to me, and I've used it so many times. Even one time we were both in a comedy contest, and we're competing against each other. And I did the sobriety check joke, and then I did DUI. I got a huge laugh, and I like look over at him and I give him like a little fake gun, like "Thank you, buddy."
Yeah.
As I moved on in the competition, and he didn't. It was joyous. No, it was pretty rude, probably. But a lot. And honestly, when I got to the point of making the album, there's so many different lines that even the line "dumber than a fish" was it's a part of one of my first jokes. Even what I named my album after is a tag that another comedian gave me. It was like, man, did I write any of my own stuff? You know, but it's also like knowing that, appreciating that, and knowing that that even though stand-up comedy is an individualistic sport, or like activity, or you know, it's like very, very by yourself. It's not, and there's a lot of groups and different people that help you along the way and help in different ways. And there's people that, you know, don't care about you or don't help you at all or whatever, but that's fine too. But there's so much of that, at least in this album and in that joke in particular, that I have to acknowledge John Schreck's killer line DUI in that, because it's just alliteration. It's so good when you can come up with something that rolls off the tongue that well and then hits the person's ear in a way that they're like, that like puts it all together, puts a little bow on everything. So really thankful for that line from John. And but that was in my early 20s. I was drinking and driving quite a bit. I was getting arrested for it. I was making jokes about it on stage still, and I'm still making jokes, but I always try to make it where it's not like, you know, it's okay to drink and drive. Maybe if I say afterwards, I'm like, yeah, no, don't drink and drive. If you're get someone to get an Uber, or yeah, I would say that often afterwards. I'd be like, because I just don't like. It's one thing to have like a great joke about drinking and driving, but then you say it 50, 100, 150 times, and you're like, am I perpetuating this idea that drinking and driving is okay? Like, you know, like it's just because it's a good switcheroo doesn't mean I should be telling people to go drink and drive.
I'm researching my jokes.
And I was in South Carolina, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, with Garrett Elzinga, who's from Michigan. Great comic. We were co-headlining the Myrtle Beach Comedy Club. And after the show, he doesn't drink at all. And after the show, I think I only had literally like 2 drinks that night. So I was fine. We were driving home. And when we were driving home, I was like, he was like, do you want me to drive? And I'm like, oh, I only had a few drinks. I'm fine. And then we got pulled over by a sobriety checkpoint that night after I'd been doing that joke. And I like look over at them as they're walking up to the door, or the window. I'm like, man, I should have had you fucking drive. But I wasn't drunk, and I was fine. It was just because I did have a few drinks. But there's another one of like art almost coming back to fucking kick you in the ass right there, you know?
Yeah, right. Does art imitate life, or does
yeah, exactly.
life imitate art?
I think I deserve this. I deserve this.
Yeah.
It's just karma knocking on your window.
Yeah, Karn and asking me how many drinks I had, and I literally was like two.
So it's not hack.
It's not a hack. It's right on. It's
I should have a handful of DUIs. I'm very lucky.
Oh, for sure.
It's like, ooh. There was
Yeah,
a
the
wake-up
one-
call on St. Patrick's Day one year, but yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
The ones that I really did have too, like when I did actually, I have 3 DUIs total, and that's a lot. But I got my first one when I was 19 years old. I wasn't even 21, and I got a DUI. I was starting early, and then I got a second one, and that one I wasn't even drunk. I just took off from, like, you know, when you're like watching the red light turn and then you like go, but it doesn't turn. And then, so I like went halfway into the intersection, stopped, and the police like pulled me over, and I did have something to drink, but I remember I was on my way to go drink. So I was like telling the officers, I'm like, I'm not even drunk yet. I'm just going to get drunk. But they don't care about that. I still got a DUI for that. And,
it was like a preemptive like a minority report.
You got intent to drink and then drive again.
We can tell you're going to be, we saved a bunch of lives later on tonight.
Pre-CAG.
Oh man, those guys, they messed with me. And I had a mint in my mouth. I remember, and they're like, do you have a mint in your mouth? Spit that mint out. And I was like, what's illegal about having a mint in your mouth?
Right.
What are you talking about?
Deception.
And
Intent to deceive.
Intent to deceive the officers.
Why do you have all those pennies in your mouth, man?
Oh gosh, that's good.
Mouth pennies.
And then the last one, I was drunk and I deserved it. And I think I was sober for, I think 3 years after that. I went to AA for a little bit and sobered up, and it was good. It was good because I was doing comedy the whole time, and it's not very easy to be sober in comedy, like freshly sober. You know, like when you get sober, you're doing comedy in bars and everybody's drinking around you, but now everybody's sober is comic wise. Like you look at all the comics that are successful, you're like sober. They're all really sober. So like it's not out of the norm to be a sober comedian.
You can't laugh at that.
The joke itself, the 2 drinks thing.
Yes.
I enjoyed that part. Just because I did that. You know, I mean, so that was one of those, and it wasn't like the main joke. It was almost like a throwaway line to set up kind of this scene. And I feel like it connects with anybody who's gotten pulled over after drinking, just because, I mean, it is hack, but is it hack if it's reality? You know, if people actually do it, is that hack?
No, and it's also, like you said, it's a throwaway line. It's not the basis of the joke. The joke isn't about 2 drinks. It's just a line that people say when they get pulled over, and it's memorable. And you know something is relatable or memorable, or when it gets that reaction. And I think that's why I kept it in there, is because every time I'd say 2 drinks, it'd get a little laugh. You know, like because there's reality to it, so there's something in there. And that's the main thing about whenever you're deconstructing a joke, or why you have this part or why you keep that. And it's really, it's whether you're listening to the audience or not. And if the audience was telling me that 2 drinks part isn't funny, then I'd throw it, I'd cut it. It wouldn't be in there because it's not relatable. But I do remember it's like you're saying, or like we were talking about with the tags. It's just like you take in all this, you take in a lot of advice on everything from any joke, and it's usually someone you respect. You know, it's not like some crappy comic that's going to be like, you shouldn't say that. That's hack. And be like, you're a hack. What are you talking about?
Yeah, that didn't strike me as hack. That didn't cross my mind. So I mean, you know, it's like it's what you would say. You know.
Yeah. It's like. You have the whole script planned out when you get pulled over. It's like, all right, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? All right, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this. And then they roll the window down. You're like, 2 drinks. Like that panic. That panic. Right. Even when you're not doing anything wrong and you get pulled over, it's like, shit, am I drunk? Like, no, it's 2:00 on a Wednesday. What do you?
Yeah.
Just that panic. And I think it's so funny when you get pulled over and the cop's like, oh, you seem a little bit nervous right now. And it's like, well, yeah, my future is dependent on what happens next. Like
I had that happen recently where I have a new car and I didn't know that my lights are not always on. Like I have my lights, like, so my back lights are off, but my front lights are on. So I can't even tell. And then this cop pulls me over coming home from work, so I'm not drunk, but I am scared that I am drunk. Like when he comes up to the car and I'm like, and I'm probably a little high, you know, I'm not totally sober, but I'm like, he's not going to know. He doesn't know or something, you know? And then he just tells me, he's like, yeah, your lights are off and in the back. And I was like, oh, sorry, this is a new car. I think, it looks like they're on daytime running lights. I don't know. You know, I didn't know that means they're off in the back. So thank you, officer, for telling me that. Can I go now? Yeah, he let me go.
Nice.
Yeah, that's something that that's a tactic that people don't use. Just be grateful the whole time. It's like, wow, you want me to walk this whole straight line? Thank you. I haven't, you know, you're doing a great thing for this neighborhood. Thank you, officer. Like, just throw them off their game.
Yeah, there's different things that one of my friends used to say, like when you get pulled over, always stop your car, turn your car off, pull the keys out, and put your keys on your dashboard. Throw your keys out.
I don't even know how I got here.
Throw them at the cop. Be like, these are yours. I wasn't even here.
You were driving, like a Jedi mind trick.
Well, it looks like we're throwing away the keys too, son.
But he just said, like, having that the keys on the dashboard and the car turned off shows like the officer respect that you understand that you're in control, or he's in control, and you're submissive as much as possible. And I was like, okay. So I do that, but now I've got like a key fob thing, so it doesn't. I can just I'm like, it's up here.
Yeah.
Press the button when I leave.
I can still start it.
Yeah.
I always yes sir, no sir, the cops.
Yeah, that's a good one too, sir.
Yes sir, no sir.
But make sure it's a sir.
Right. Yeah. You're drunk and it's a woman.
What's your gender identity, officer? I just want to make sure we're on the same page here. Be submissive. Was I bad?
I can't wait for that to happen in the future, where like you have to worry about police officers' gender identity. That's like how far we've gotten. Oh, such progress.
The actual PC police are
he gendered the police.
The PC police are the actual police now. So yeah, the DIY line too. That cracked me up because I love wordplay, and I know Steve has kind of a joke that plays on the DUI. The alliteration sort of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I say my girlfriend got a DUI, and everybody's like, "Oh, that sucks," and I'm like, "No, she didn't get pulled over for driving drunk. Her doctor put her IUD in backwards."
It's good.
Yeah.
I love wordplay like that. And honestly, thanks to John Schreck, because without him, I probably wouldn't have even asked you to be on the podcast. That one joke.
That one joke got me.
Yeah, it was between you and John, and I decided, you know what, we're gonna have Gabe on instead. So no, that's funny, and just taking tags from accepting tags from other comics. Like, you talk about it being a solo endeavor, which like on stage you are by yourself, but it really is the collective. I mean, the better the scene, the more you push yourself. You know, the more everybody helps one another out. Like, I don't understand the comics who are just very about themselves, like won't take tags, won't give advice. Like, to me, that just worsens the whole industry in general, just because we're already all facing an uphill battle. So, you know, I mean,
I think you're right too, especially when you say scene. Like it really comes into play of like where you're from. Like, you break down a comic when you're like, oh, who are you? Where are you from? And you think about like other comics, from Cleveland or from Cincinnati, and it is a big deal to have a good scene and to be able to grow and get better, because you're doing jokes in open mic settings where sometimes the only people at the open mic are other comics, and are these jokes, when you're doing jokes at an open mic like that, are those jokes that are going to work with the general audience, like when you go to a Hilarities or Improv or whatever, and are you going to have are you going to have that relatability? And sometimes a joke that difference between jokes that kill in a open mic and then kill in like a real paid show or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you have to have just a different approach, not a whole different set, but just different people respect different stuff. A lot of open mic stuff, you can just do jokes making fun of jokes, like inside baseball jokes that are making fun of the norms or the two drinks or whatever.
Right.
Whatever.
Yeah.
I think, and I think that's even that tactic, that kind of, if you're joking about the joke, almost breaking the fourth wall, sometimes that can open up an entire new perspective on your joke too. So there's whenever a comic's like, oh, I don't want to, perform just in front of other comics, this is a waste of time. Is it though? I mean, you have a real opportunity to get a fresh perspective on something that you've been doing in front of live audiences.
You need to challenge yourself.
Right. And just the offering of tags too. I mean, that is, that's something that I'm always open to. I've got, I've had a few tags that were given to me by other comics. Steve, when I joke about getting COVID, I talk about how my body temperature is 104.5, which isn't a body temperature. That's an FM radio station. That was something that Steve offered to me.
104.5, the fever.
Yeah.
The fever.
And I use that and it goes great. And, that's something that you're not going to use. And the same thing, for me, if I see a comic on stage that's joking about something that I would never joke about, and I think of something that, I'll offer it to them because I'm not going to use it. It's almost a waste of just like letting it disappear into the ether of my subconscious.
Yeah. Having a writer's room is great because, you have that synergy of if you're all going to trade stuff, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's what New York a lot of New York comics do is they get together or wherever and they trade, they get their brain power and, it's better.
Laughing.
The second part of the joke is about the fingerprinting cop. Kind of take us through how that bit came about.
Well, that was from, I would say, I've got this many mugshots.
Headshots. I get arrested so I get free headshots. It's great.
That wasn't even on purpose. I just honestly messed up and said headshots instead of mugshots.
That's funny.
But yeah, no, I think I had a joke about how I have 6 mugshots and then I would like do jokes. I would have some jokes about taking the mugshots and how taking the picture is like the fun part of getting arrested. And the not fun part is the fingerprinting. And it's because every time out of all those 6 times that I've been arrested, it was always the exact same thing. And this is a little bit worrisome, or I didn't know like if this was going to be like obsolete or like if they still use just like your finger and the ink pad, but if they have like a high-tech scanner or whatever, like some places, someone came up after a show one time and they're like, they actually do have that scanner here or something. And I was like, okay, well, I haven't heard otherwise from other people. So basically it was just that this cop would take your finger and roll, not just one, but it would be all of your fingers like so hard. And every time it was just so distinctive about how painful it was and how into it they were, or like how I felt like they were into it. And the best part about that joke is having all the police officers come up to me and explain to me why they do it that way, or like why they squeeze so hard. It's because usually it's because you're so drunk that we can't get a good fingerprint unless we just like totally squeeze your finger and do it like that. Like they just from experience, they know like if you do it loosely, you're just going to have to do it again. So they're just like trained basically in that sense to do it very forcefully and very like turn and then, but it really breaks down to me just making fun of cops in general and like how like the idea of like, how do you become a cop? And it's because your older brother beat you up too much or something, you know, like it's sort of gets into just like the psychology of like who the cop is that ends up doing the fingerprint thing. And it usually is, from what I've heard from police, it usually is the same guy every time. Like he's the guy that does the fingerprint. Like there's one guy that's really good at it, and if he's not there, they're like, oh crap, I got to do this, and they're not very good at it. So, and then the line of you can't look your lover in the eye. I can't maintain an erection or maintain eye contact during intercourse. And I made it. I honestly, it was probably like a little dirtier when I first made it, but I like changed it to intercourse. So it would be like not as dirty. So when I'm doing like a cleaner show, I'm like, I could still do that joke or whatever. But yeah, finding is kind of, I don't think it happened right away. It probably took a few months or whatever of batting around. But once I found the three, and then like always wanted to be a pro wrestler. I don't know, just like always want to be a football player. I could have said that or something, but I'm not a big pro wrestling fan, but there's a bunch of comics that love pro wrestling too. So that probably has a big reason why that line is in there. Just like a little wink to all those comics out there that love their pro wrestling. And then the second part of that, which is like kind of the callback part where I talk about like what I love about comedy. And I do this throughout my act whenever I'm doing like a half hour or just like a longer act. I have a few things that I say that I like. Basically, what I'm trying to do is I mean, this is an act, these are jokes, but there's a few things that I want you to like take away from the set and I want you to remember. And the main one is my closer it's about getting arrested. It's about my first arrest when I was in college. And it's not on my album because of legal reasons, because of the guy's name that I call out in my record label was like, yeah, we can't do that. They're going to sue us. And so it's a very popular auto parts store that rhymes with O'Malley's. No,
Yeah.
It's not O'Malley's. It's different than that. So it's basically that's not even on the album because, and I knew when I was recording the album, I told them, I was like, okay, there's the album. And now here's a joke that's not going to be on the album. And then I finish it up. And usually that's my closer whenever I do. And that's a joke that I want. It's kind of like a mental, I say this name over and over again and I make it stick in your head. And then I sing a little jingle that you hear on the radio all the time. And that makes it reiterates like, oh, I do know who this guy is. And it's a story about me from college. And it's my first big arrest. So, and that my first time getting fingerprinted too. But that idea of the idea of the second part where I'm like, maybe you'll be, you never know, someone from this room might get arrested in the future and you'll be getting your fingerprint and you'll think about this joke. And I really like that. And that's literally like one of the reasons I loved doing stand-up comedy and honestly, like more so than a lot of people get into stand-up to, do whatever, be famous, to be in movies, to do that. I really just love the idea. There's a few things that I get to tell everybody, just like a preacher or something, and you get to, that stuff will stick in people's heads. That's kind of the reason for the fingerprinting. And the second part of that joke that does seem to get a really good laugh too when I call back the you can't look your lover in the eye. It's just like the way you say it. It's really a fun joke. I really like doing that one. I don't even know if I answered totally what you were looking for with the reasoning for the fingerprinting, but no, yeah, that's pretty much where it all comes from. It's experience of having those experiences. And there's another joke that I believe it's on the album too, where I say, where I ask people in the audience, like, round of applause, who's been arrested here before? And it's a weird thing to ask audiences in general, because nobody wants to admit that they've been arrested. And maybe you get to this, sometimes you get, like, it depends from show to show who like claps when that, and like some people, like, you know, they'll clap and their wife will look at them like, what, you've been arrested? You know, they don't even know, like, it's like not something that you talk about very regularly, about you getting arrested and you know, telling people in public, and hey, don't do that. That's not what you do, you know? So that joke, and then I say on the second part of the joke, I say, okay, now by a round of applause, who here met online? And no one claps, because no one obviously ever wants to admit that they met online. And then I point that out. I say, see, more people willing to admit they've been arrested in public than are willing to admit that they met online. And that joke is crazy dangerous, or not dangerous. It's just, it's adventure. It's you never know what's going to happen, because it could be way more people have been or admit that they've been arrested than people that have met online. And then one show I did, it was like it was barely anybody that'd been arrested, and everybody met online. And it was like some meetup group that was there. That's like the theme of the show, was like everybody had met
funny.
online. And I didn't even know that. So then you have to like come up with something right there on the fly to make it funny. And I think that's a good, it's kind of a crowd work joke, you know, because you're going on the fly. There should be defining points, but sometimes they change, and then you have to make something up right there. And I like having little exercises like that, not like too many, but like a few jokes like that'll keep me on my toes and keep me looking to try and make it funny. And it doesn't always work, but you can always just, usually when something like that, you can easily save that and be like, all right, well, that didn't work. And even that gets a laugh, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Right. Mm-hmm. It makes you feel alive taking a risk like that, you know, because if you're doing the same set the same way and you get the same result every time, how boring is that? Versus like, all right, let's spice it up a little bit. Let's have the audience choose their own adventure here.
That's true. I like that. And, I don't think I could do it like the whole time, but it is challenging, and it's good. You're right. It's a good way to spice things up and to keep you on your toes and keep you feeling alive.
Right. You never know when you get have a good comeback that stays in your set, you know, the whole time.
Yeah. So I touched on it a little bit, but I want to talk a little bit more about the getting arrested in college. I went away to school in Fulton, Missouri, a place called Westminster College. It was probably 600 kids, very small liberal arts school. Everybody knew each other. It's in a small town. And midway through my junior year, I got arrested in the library when I was studying for finals by the police. And it was for an incident that had happened the year before. I guess they were waiting 7 or 8 months, so I wouldn't know who the undercover agent was. That was basically a friend of mine had a friend from home, and that guy was wearing a wire, and neither of them were my friends. That's what I say in my joke. And but then I got arrested for selling drugs, and I was not a drug dealer. I was a drug dealer though. Like I could definitely, like, I knew the guy that was a drug dealer, and I could go to his place and he felt safe, like getting me whatever. So I was definitely a middleman sort of thing, but never made any money off of it. Was just doing favors for people, and got caught up with an undercover sting operation and got arrested in, it was in December. Like I said, I was in the library studying for finals. These police officers came into the library. They were like, "Are you Gabe Kea?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I went outside, and they're like, "You might want to sit down." I remember them saying, like, "You might want to sit down." I'm like, I think you guys scared me enough already. Why don't you just tell me what's going on? And then they told me that I was under arrest for 2 counts of distribution in a school zone, which is a college, is a school zone basically. And And then they marched me back down to my apartment, or I was living in a fraternity house at that time. And they took me into my room, searched my whole room. They thought they were going to find like pounds of weed in my closet or something. And they found a Frisbee full of like drug paraphernalia. That was the only thing they found. But what had happened was the police had been going around the whole campus and going up to people and being like, "Are you Gabe Kea? You're under arrest." They'd done it to like 5 people. And it shows how horrible they were doing of a job they did, especially since they took me up to my room. And now by this time they've been going around campus saying, "Are you Gabe Kea? Are you Gabe Kea?" Everybody knows I'm getting arrested except for me. All my fraternity brothers went into my room and there was a big bong that was in there. They took the bong out. They took everything that they could find. They just didn't find that little Frisbee full of paraphernalia. That was the only thing they didn't find. And then they took me down to my room. They thought they were going to find a bunch of stuff. They were like, "This is it. We got the guy." And there was nothing there. So they're driving me to the station. I get perp walked. I'm like handcuffed, being led out of my fraternity house. And these 2 cops have me in the cop car, and they start trying to make small talk with me to like make me feel better, I guess. And they're like, one of them says, "So what are you studying up there at the university?" And I literally, without even think, I just said sales, and that's not a major. Like, I just thought it was like a joke, and it made both the police officers laugh right there. And I remember at that moment, Tim Allen's headshot or mugshot, right? Mugshot this time.
Yeah.
Popped into my head. I remember thinking like, I could be like a stand-up comedian like Tim Allen. He got arrested for drugs, right? And maybe I could be the next Tool guy or whatever. And that's a big origin story of where my stand-up comedy career started, was making those 2 police officers laugh on the way to them taking me to the station. And then the guy in the station sat me down in a little room, and they were telling me, they were like, "We're going to give you an undercover agent, and you're going to go to that guy's house that you get the drugs from, and you're going to buy more drugs from him, and then we're going to bust him. We'll get him." And I told them, I was like, "You guys are idiots. Even if I wanted to do that, which I'm not going to do that, you already went all over campus and arrested 5 different people thinking they were me. So no one's going to sell me any drugs. You just screwed yourselves and me. Like, you're ruining people's lives here. What are you doing?" I am telling them, like, I never even made a dime off of selling drugs. And that's the story of my first big arrest. And I do have a big joke about that I do every time, basically every show I do. And it's probably my most memorable joke is my O'Malley's. No, I'm not going to say the name on any podcast.
They're our sponsor, actually.
Yeah,
they are your sponsor.
No, we're looking to switch over to Advanced Auto Parts. So any dirt you can get on that other one.
Good. No, one of my first times on Bob and Tom, they are a sponsor of Bob and Tom, and the commercial is playing, and I'm getting all these texts on my while I'm on the show in studio, and they're like, "You would not believe the commercial that's playing right now," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I can't talk about that." But what a lawyer told me is like, I can go around telling the joke where I tell the truth, because it's the truth. There's no, like, they can't get me for defamation, but what they can do is they can bog you down with litigation. They can sue you for this and like make the court fees be so much that I just have to cease and desist because of but what a lawyer said is, he's like, you're safe as long as you don't put it out on YouTube, don't put it out on Rooftop Comedy or on anything, unless you're getting something big in response. He's like, the only way I would do it is if you get like the Tonight Show, and they got you on the Tonight Show, and then you can tell them the story there or whatever. But otherwise, just don't mention their name. And I do it on stage all the time. And he said that, like, other people can film you, and put it up on YouTube, and you can't do it. You're not responsible for that. So as long as you're not filming yourself and putting it up on some sort of social media where everybody can see it. So I can keep doing my joke, but I tried to put it on my album as like a hidden track even, and the record label was they basically sent me an email from their legal department that was like that I read, and I was like, yep, this is what my lawyer told me 10 years ago. He's like, this is the way it is. So
what was it that was it? I mean, it obviously doesn't look good for them, right? Whatever the content of the joke is, right?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, it makes them look like a bunch of narcs. So that's what but yeah, I don't even know.
What a weird thing for an auto parts store to not want to be known as.
Yeah.
Like we want to be the cool auto parts place, man. You're making us look like.
Yeah, and it's I'm a little I might be more paranoid than I need to be about it, because they might not even know or care or whatever. But I do know this auto parts place is based out of Springfield, Missouri, and I do shows all around there, and I've had people come up to me that are like, "Oh, we know Ryan, and we'll let him know that you're doing this joke." And I was like, "Please do, please let him know," because he knows the situation. He's basically the guy that he was the impetus of that whole sting operation. He got in trouble, and they needed him to take an undercover cop with him and bust other people. And I just happened to be one of those schmucks. I was the idiot that fell for it. So that's why he went to me, probably not because I was a real drug dealer, but because I was gullible enough to do it.
Right.
So it's sad, but.
So did their sting operation end with you pretty much? I mean, you were a dead end, obviously.
Yeah, no, they got this other guy that was like for real. He was on the football team, and he was big into, and I never had any relationship with him. And that's who I think they were like targeting, but he got smart to them when they were trying to purchase drugs from him, and he refused the money. So he also like, yeah, he got, I think he got away with, or got out of it, but maybe he went to, I don't know. I don't even know the situation with him, but I wasn't the end all be all target. I was just a casualty, someone that got caught up in the wake.
Got it. So that was your first time getting arrested. Like, what else? I mean, are there any of your other 5 that were memorable that are not necessarily joke worthy, but there's something there out of the ordinary?
I have done a joke where when you say like 6 on stage, like that sounds scary, and it sounds like that's like, and I think I said to somebody, I was like, oh, I've never hurt anybody, never like any abuse or assault or anything. I'm only drugs and alcohol, only trying to hurt this guy, like, so that's where all my arrests all go around drugs and alcohol. Before I was 25 too, is all in that nice little, 19 to 20, 24-year-old time period where I was a mess. And now that's 15 years ago. I'm off. For the one from college was so intense that I was on supervised probation for 5 years, where I'd go in once a month and I'd pee into a cup and have the probation officer, like do the drug test and everything. And that was when it was pretty serious. That was from age. Yeah, and I was still getting arrested while that was going on. Like, who kind of an idiot? What an idiot. Even in supervised probation, he's still getting arrested.
Man,
I remember my first, I had it was my first meeting with this probation officer. She was a new one. And it was also the night before was my first time on stage. It was a Tuesday night open mic at the St. Louis Funny Bone. and I got wasted at the open mic because it was my first time on stage. I probably had like 3 or 4 drinks before, and then I had a great set, and I partied with all the it was a bringer show, so like 30 people in the crowd were there to see me, you know. And we partied afterwards. We went to another bar. Everybody's celebrating. They're like, Gabe, yeah, you did it. And then the next morning, I had to go to see my probation officer, this new one, for the first time. And I walked in, and she was like, "What? Are you kidding me? You smell like alcohol, right? I can smell it coming out of your pores. This is your first meeting? Get out of here. Get out." And she like kicked me out of her office right away and was like, "Come back in a week. And if you smell like alcohol again," and she gave me like a second chance. But I just remember being like, I was so devastated. I was like, "Oh my gosh, how could I let this happen?" But
Yeah.
I just, what do you do when it's your first time on stage?
Yeah. Did you say that? Like, what?
Yeah.
I'm going to be famous, lady. Come on.
This is part of my journey.
This is part of my journey.
So the thing, going back to the bit, the thing that I really like about what you do is you create a character, the fingerprint cop. And the very first thing you do is, and you can butt in at any point and tell me if I'm wrong, but from my perspective, you setting him up as the person who's been in front of this ink pad all day long. He's been drinking Red Bull since 8 a.m. That almost creates a picture in my mind of who this person is without you describing like what they look like or how long they've been on the job or whatever. Like it's a very sneaky way to create a mental picture in people's head without doing it. So I think that's a great tool to use.
That's great. And it doesn't always work out that way. I'm listening to that version that the version from the album, which is a really good one. Like I don't always say the fingy cop, like that got a big laugh. And I'm like, man, why don't I say that more often? I think I just said that like that time when I did it or something. And
yeah.
And it's sometimes you'll add that. Sometimes you'll add the Red Bull or drinking coffee. I think I said coffee and Red Bull for a while, like who's drinking coffee and Red Bull, you know, like, but it does. I think every time you do a joke, it changes a little bit slightly, but you want to paint that. Yeah. What you're trying to do is just paint that picture of what that person might be, what they look like, or what kind of person they might be.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm picturing like doesn't have a good relationship with his kids. Like him and his wife are always fighting. He was probably on a bender last night. You know, he's got unkept, like his shirt's untucked, pit stains. Like that's I'm picturing who's the dude from NYPD Blue? That dude, but that had let himself
Dennis
go.
Franz? Yeah. That's good.
That's who I see.
What I'm looking for.
Yeah. And then just the line, he rolls your finger so hard you can feel the aggression from his childhood. Again, that says so much. But then you go into the power of threes with the, my dad never hugged me. I always wanted to be a pro wrestler or sometimes a football player, and they can't make eye contact during intercourse. Like it's the kind of person who probably uses the word intercourse like to his significant other.
Did you engage in intercourse?
Yeah, exactly.
Did you engage in intercourse?
Like intercourse is purely transactional.
Yeah.
He talks to his kids when they come home. Were you intercoursing tonight?
Were you underage drinking?
Were you participating in illicit activities?
Anything lewd and lascivious tonight?
Yeah. Like just, yeah.
And then your whole bit, the callback, like your moral of the story, so to speak. Way do you tell them when you compare doing comedy to being at a concert and hearing a song and it elicits a memory or whatever, the next time you're getting arrested, that whole bit to me is almost you giving them the ability to find the funny in it in the moment. Like almost like learn from my story. And that's such a powerful tool to use as a comedian. Like the reason, so I speak on like humor theory and using humor in the workplace because I had a very clairvoyant moment at the end of a sketch show that I ran in New York, that like someone came up to me after the show and she was like, "Oh, that was so funny. You know, thanks for doing the show." And then she left and I was like, man, she's going to maybe remember the show for the next couple of hours. She's going to go to bed, wake up tomorrow like it never even happened. Like, what if I could give people the tools to make themselves laugh or to recall like what happened here? And you do that in this bit. So I'm sitting there listening to it like, yeah, like people can laugh at this.
I often say too, like, I don't think I said it in that version, but I'll say like, you're going to wake up tomorrow, you won't even remember my name. Like, and which is like a very true thing about comedy is, and I might even say it so they like think like, I will remember your name, you know, like, but there's a lot of truth to that like, especially when and I open for a lot of people. So I'm like, you know, it's like, you're there to see that person and, oh, this person's not bad too, you know? So you kind of are just trying to get your name in there whenever you can, or that's why it's good. That's why it's good to have some sort of merch with your name on it, which is kind of weird. But like I sell T-shirts, and it's like a T-shirt of me in a onesie going like like that, and it doesn't have my name on it. And then I have buttons and magnets that also have that same image on it. And then there's this one that's just my headshot with my name on it. And for some reason, obviously the reason is because my name's on it. It was like people want to take that one because they're like, oh, I want to remember I want to look you up later or something like that. So it's that's also a good thing for comedians. Like, I don't know, I'm not like get a business card, you know, like, but it is good to have something afterwards that they can take home to remember your name, so they can follow up, you know, or they can throw it on the ground in the parking lot. So when you're walking to your car, you can see it and you go, oh, there's my name right there. Look at that.
It's everywhere.
That happens
That's
just
important. Yeah. You could work your name in there just to
you find it at a thrift store.
Yeah, right.
That's how you know when you made it, though. I don't know why. It's just you've had time for it to come full circle. That's all I mean.
There's a story I heard about some comic that was selling T-shirts, and he was waiting tables, and he like went up to one of his tables and was delivering food, and all of a sudden he sees like one of his T-shirts. The guy's wearing his T-shirt, and he's like, "Oh God, full circle right there."
Yeah,
that's funny. So when you're getting your finger pressed onto this stamp, like when was the moment that you realized this is funny?
Ooh, yeah, that's a tough one, because that's when the performance and the writing kind of comes together, you know. And for me, that's a lot of my process and that's why I still do open mics, because I need to have that assurance of like, oh, I think this is funny, but I still don't even know until I do it. It's like I said, when I did that show and I've been coming off the lockdown for like 3 months, like I've got stuff in my head, new stuff, right? That's all my new stuff. And I'm like, I don't know if any of that's funny. So am I just going to go out there and do it and just like have the confidence in myself that this is going to be funny? Like usually I need at least a few open mics or some place to test it out, so I can get that assurance from the audience that it is funny. So that's a lot of how I work is like getting that feedback from a live general audience that tells me like that, okay, that is funny. There's something there. And there's more there. And sometimes when you just get the one line about it, it'll take a lot more time on top of that to add on or to tag or to, you know, make it a full-fledged bit rather than just one line or one idea that like the guy squeezing your finger, squeezing the shit out of your finger is funny, which it is, because it is super relatable, and it is like, it's something that people definitely have the and people will tell you, people will send you messages. They'll be like, oh, I was going to get my my passport and they were fingerprinting me, and all of a sudden he squeezed my finger and I thought about your joke, and they'll send you a message about some sort of instance like that where your joke was came full circle to them, and I made them think about that,
That's gotta feel good.
Yeah, I love that stuff. When someone, it was Alex Schubert, who's a local Cincinnati comedian. He was down during the protests, it was right after George Floyd, and people were protesting in the city, and he got arrested and he got put into a holding cell with a bunch of other people protesting. And he goes, man, I told your fingerprinting joke to everybody that was in the holding cell and it crushed. And usually someone tells you your joke, you're like, hey, don't tell my joke. But I was like, that's awesome, Alex. Tell that joke. That's the perfect place too.
Right.
They all got fingerprinted. So they're all like totally relatable to that feeling. So yeah, I remember him sending me that message from, probably right when he got out of jail. He's like, oh, I got to tell Gabe I used this joke in jail. And I'm like, that's awesome.
Funny. And like you said, that's the perfect place for it. just a reminder that there is some levity here. Because when you're getting arrested, you're not like, all right, like we're doing it. Nobody, if anybody gets arrested, they're like, this is the best day of my life. It's like that old woman who's, yeah, right. I mean, you see those stories on the news where some 95-year-old woman gets arrested by the police because she's always wanted to get arrested.
That's a good Make-A-Wish. Getting arrested.
Yeah, it really is.
The kid wants to go spray paint something, or he's like, yeah.
You could do something illegal. That's fine. You have cancer. Steve, have you been arrested?
No, I haven't. I've had close calls, but I'm very lucky to not have a record because I really should.
Yeah,
I got a lot of felonies.
You're with a bunch of prudes here. Gabe.
All the felonies were before I was 21, before I was 19 even. So
yeah,
so it's 13 to 19. I was lots of.
It's a good way to do it. Get it out of your system, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
that's what I should have done with that DUI when I was 19 or whatever. But didn't learn.
I mean, you say you haven't been since you were 25, right?
Yeah, no. So it's 15 years of not doing, and it's not like I'm not doing anything illegal. I am trying my best. I'm out here. I'm doing street art. I'm tagging. I'm doing a lot of stuff that's just so dumb that you could easily get arrested for.
Make your DUI joke real life.
Yeah.
Pull up behind a cop. I got arrested once. I was in college. I had a few drinks. I mean, it wasn't crazy. I was the least drunk of my friends, so I drove them all home. And I lived with my parents at the time in the suburbs of Akron. And there was a dude in a Ford Fusion right outside their driveway. And this is a dark, quiet neighborhood. So the fact it's 1 a.m. and there's a dude in his car outside my house, that's weird. So I just kept driving just to see what would happen. And then he started following me. And then I lost him. And then all of a sudden somebody else started following me really close. So I'm tearing through these residential neighborhoods because I think I'm getting chased by some organized crime syndicate or something that I don't know what's going on. So I call my buddy. I'm like, hey, I think something weird's happening. I'm going to come over to your house right now. Like he's going to protect me, just whatever. And then they had the cop lights on the dashboard. It was an undercover cop. And apparently there had been some car break-ins in the neighborhood. And so I'm like, well, why would you pull me over if you know I was literally pulling into my driveway? And they're like, well, why'd you run? I don't know. I thought I was being chased. And they're like, well, why wouldn't you call the police? I was like, I don't know, because I've been drinking.
I've been drinking.
So I was lucky because it got thrown out because there was no probable cause to pull me over in the first place. So I got a reckless hop. I pleaded down to a reckless hop. The judge was like, you can go to court and fight it and you would probably win, but you'd end up paying more in court costs than you would if you were to plead down. So that's what happened. But in hindsight, at the time, it was not funny. I hid it from my parents. I got a lawyer. I blew all my savings from college. And but in hindsight, like the fact that I thought that I was involved in some like underground crime ring in Copley, Ohio, like that. So in hindsight, that's funny. And I was the one trying to make small talk with the cops in the backseat.
Oh,
I was like, no, I just tried, I drove my friends home so they're home safe, like thinking that they'd be like, oh, no, this guy's a good driver when he's drunk. We'll let him go. But to me, the funny thing is when people get arrested, immediately they become the victim. And it's like, if you were doing something wrong, like if you weren't doing something wrong, you have a case. But, to me, that victim mentality where it's like, you're picking on me. And for so long, I was like, that cop was such an asshole. It's like, no, he was just doing his job. So, I mean, there's any number of ways to find the funny in it.
So the weird part about how you said you kept it from your parents, isn't there something that like when you get arrested, like they send there's a bunch of direct mail stuff that comes to your address from lawyers?
Yep.
I
got to the mailbox every day.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, because the mail came like clockwork around 3 p.m. every day. And there was something like I would actually skip my class to stay home and make sure that I got the mail before anyone else did.
That's crazy.
Eventually I told my dad, and then I told my mom like a couple of years ago about it. It was not even a big deal, but she's one of those people who would, who that would happen. And she would be like, well, she would never shut up about it. Like she'd be like, make sure you don't drink and drive. Every single conversation I had. I'm like, Mom, we're at church. We're leaving from church. Like stuff like that.
The Eucharist.
Yeah. Right. You didn't slow down on that blood of Christ.
Bloodthirsty.
You crossed the line.
But the character that you create, and I don't remember off the top of my head, like if you do that for anyone else, the rest of your album, but a good tool to use if you're creating a character from somebody is just to ask yourself the question, well, if they do that, then what else might be true? Or what else might they do? How much of that did you go through as you were putting together, like, oh, my dad never hugged me, like I wanted to be a pro wrestler? Is that a tool that you use or have used?
Yeah, definitely. And I think I usually like would mine from maybe jokes that I used to have. I used to work in a country club in St. Louis, and there was this old guy that would get wasted all the time. And I remember I was like, sir, are you going to be okay? Like, do you need a ride home? And then he told me, he was like, my son's a state trooper. And I just thought that was like the funniest thing. Like he like had this out because his son's a state trooper. Like if wherever he gets pulled over, he's going to be fine. And I made a joke about how that's the best way to live, right? Is to like have some kids and make sure they become cops. So then you can like drink and drive the rest of your life because you got a straight Hooper was the guy. I made him in the bit or whatever. But I think I used like some of that old joke that I used to do that it never really was. It's one of those jokes that you stop doing for a good reason, like it's like doesn't get a really good reaction. But there's the truth in it was like, I think the joke was like, he's like, hey, quit throwing that baseball around and go outside and beat up your little brother. Like it's just like something about cops coming from that sort of environment where they're just like from an abusive young older brother or something. And there's also there was this guy that we went to high school with. His older brother was a police officer, and he would drive people around when he was drunk. He would just be like, I'm drunk, I'm cool, I'll do it. And then whenever he'd get pulled over, he'd give his license to the cop and then his brother's card. And basically that cop would just call his brother, and his brother would come and get him and bail him out of whatever situation that he had. So there's like situations like that I grew up around or like knew of that kind of definitely go into the writing of that, of knowing that like there are situations like this where people have their get out of jail free cards. Like And I don't know how much that happens anymore. This is like something, this is something from 15, 20 years ago. So I don't know if there's places where you can get pulled over and just like give them your card and they're like, okay, you're good.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
It's funny. That was sort of my dad's response when I told him. He was like, oh, man, when I was your age, if I would have gotten pulled over right outside my house, the cops would have let me go. They would have given me a ride home. Or, you know. So that's funny. My son's a state trooper. It's funny that you can take older jokes that worked and then kind of take a couple of elements from those bits and apply them to current bits. And all of a sudden, it's just like you've revitalized an old bit in a new way. That's such a cool tool to use.
Yeah, it's actually, I brought this to show you guys too. This is how, just to tell you about my writing process. This is my box of, basically it's got all these stickers from comedy and all this stuff all on it. And then what it is it's all my set lists, like just from, this one starts, there's 2020 and it goes all the way back to Seymour, Indiana, January 13th, 2017, Tabari McCoy and Cam O'Connor. And I write down like who was on the set with me and then the whole set. And I keep this is how I do all my writing. And is not all my writing, but like all my performance writing. Like, so whenever I have a show, it goes into that box. And if I have, say I was in Cleveland 2 years ago at this club, I'll go back into the box. I'll go and look at what I did last time I was there, start writing out my set list for what I'm doing this time and try not to make it exactly the same as what I was doing before. So that's a lot of that whole process that's a lot of my writing process is the performance and I keep all, I mean, it's open mic, show. The
That's cool, man.
Goes in there.
You know what's interesting is I do the same thing, except I don't log it like that, which is you have a very nice organized method. I just have a bag full of set lists. From like, they're very distinct looking. They're on like receipts. They're on little torn up pieces of paper, but they are distinct sets I had at certain places which aren't labeled, but at least I have them all and I keep them because I can review them, So
yeah, that's cool. It's mine's very like anal retentive, like 8x10 folded 4 times. So it's like the same size. So it fits in nicely. And if I have to, like, if I'm somewhere and I use like a little receipt or something, I'll like copy it down afterwards onto like the right piece of paper or something. So it's, that's definitely my process for keeping set lists. And I think I got that from Jerry Seinfeld's Comedian, the documentary, when he just had crib notes that he would write down. And the whole documentary is about him trashing his act and then doing a whole new hour and building that hour. And then it had Orny Adams as like the kind of juxtaposition to him, and Orny Adams had stuff like this big box full of like all these jokes. Oh, I got jokes. I got all my we got getting arrested jokes. Yeah, I got all those right here. Here are all my getting arrested jokes. Or he like categorizes them all like that. So
I definitely consolidated all of my topics over the years, because at first you're like, nothing is cohesive. But then over the years, things cluster into big topics. And then I create bits out of one-liners. And it sounds like they're still one-liners, but they're all interrelated. So they still make a bit too. So,
yeah, I definitely do the same thing with the chunks. And like, I'll have 5-minute chunks that I'll usually always do right together. And yeah, it's a good way to help me go through my process. And it also, I'll sit down like an hour before my show or whatever, if I'm in a hotel room or at home, and I'll write my set list. And that's like a big part of me getting ready for for the show, and I don't necessarily stick to what I wrote down 100%. You know, I'll put a little arrow or mark something off or circle something. And sometimes I'll mark something off over and over again. And I'm like, what? Oh, it's because it's a bad joke, or it's a hard joke to do, or it's difficult or something like that. You know, it'll remind me.
Yeah, that's a great system. I do digitally. So I will take, I mean, I record all of my sets. So I put down the location and then just like one word for each bit that I did, so that next time I'm at that place, just like you know, I don't want to tell the same joke twice. Or if it was like new around the conception of that bit the last time I was there, and now it's a fully fledged bit, it's almost like, look what I can do now.
Yeah, that's great.
So yeah, no, I have notebooks full of stuff. This is the podcast specific notebook, but I've got like piles of notebooks going back to 2012.
Me not repeating stuff is like on a month scale. So it's not like I don't say for like, oh, I was here a year ago, I don't want to do the same stuff. I'll just do like, was I doing this at the open mic last week? Okay, let me check that set. All right, completely rotate through new jokes, or I should say jokes they haven't heard in at least a few months. That way people aren't like not laughing at them at all, you know, if there's more comics there or whatnot. But you know, with showcases, it's different, because if it's a fresh audience, do whatever you want, you know. So.
Right.
And actually, the album helped me realize how much of some of my jokes that I won't do at an open mic, because they're kind of they're finished, and I don't need to work on them at an open mic. But I realized after some comics like would say, oh man, I hadn't heard that full turtle bit until I listened to your album, and that's like a lot more than I'd ever heard before or whatever. And I just realized I'm like, sometimes I'm not working on that joke because I don't want it to be like beaten into the ground, you know, and everybody's heard it every time. It's the same thing. Open mics is the same for me too. Like, I got to make sure that I'm not doing my same old, like, you know, jokes that everybody knows when I'm going up to the open mic. But then sometimes, especially when we're going through what we're going through right now with the lockdown, and you're not able to do your material as much, just sometimes you need to go up there and do some of your old jokes just so you can say them and do them correctly with the right cadence and everything too. So I'm trying to, and it helps those jokes grow into something more that there might be just like a one-off joke. And I recently worked with Nikki Glaser here in town, and she commented on one of my jokes. She's like, oh, the one about tickling your daughter is really funny, but it's just the one line. She's like, there's so much more that you could do with that. And I really was like, I'm like, yeah, what is it? What is it? What should I do? Like, I'm having trouble figuring it out too, but her saying that kind of gives me the idea that, okay, now I got to start doing this at open mics, and maybe I'll come up with another line or something will come to me when I'm doing it, you know?
Yeah. Those are the kind of tags that I give people. I'm like, hey, explore this idea that I thought was funny. Like maybe you'll find something that's more you than what I told you, but at least like give you the starting point of a fresh perspective on the bit.
Yeah, I think I've got something for that too, but I haven't been able to go out and do an open mic since then. So I'm kind of, you know, that anxious feeling when you're like, ooh, I think I got that line she was talking about, and now I want to go out and perform it and see if it works like I think it might, or I think it will, or like Nikki thought it would. No.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. If it doesn't work, you can just blame her.
I just text her. I'm like, will you retweet this, please?
Yeah. I need this. You don't understand. I need this. I opened for Dave Chappelle.
You know, rotating through stuff and like what you just said about adding stuff is, I remember Mary Santora told me one time, she's like, you sometimes you do these bits and I won't ever hear them again. And I'm like wondering where they went. And I'm like, well, I rotate a lot, but I'm like, maybe I rotate too much. Or like, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know. I just get too self-conscious about being repetitive because I hate that feeling of that disingenuous, like, oh, clearly not thinking of this on the spot. Not that we don't all know that, but it just feels weird.
Yeah.
I think that's, as a comedian, what you just said right there totally speaks to me, because we feel like, oh no, I can't do that. But we don't understand that even other comedians that have heard it 3 or 4 times, they'll be like, I love that joke. That's my favorite joke of yours. Like when you do it and you don't do it enough and you're like, I do it enough. I do.
Right.
That's why I don't do it as much, because you don't want to become the person that just does it the same thing every time. So, but there is a balance there, and you're right. Like, it's good to listen to people like Mary in that situation and like be like, yeah, I should do that joke more, Mary. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
absolutely.
You can't laugh at that.
All right, get to wrap this whole thing up. For anybody who gets arrested, if you could give them a tool, a little nugget of perspective in that moment to kind of sum everything up, to really bring that moral of the story to light, what would you say to them?
Don't be ashamed of it. That's what I say. I say embrace your mistakes that you've made in the past, and that's the only way that you're going to get past your mistakes and do better in the future, is not by like denying or hiding or running from your past and the past mistakes that you've made, but instead, embrace those mistakes and then use them as an example to other people of like, what you shouldn't do and what you need to be careful of. And basically, like, if it was someone like me, it'd be like, maybe quit drinking when you're in your early 20s. And that's when you need to do it, because, and especially comics, like, try doing comedy. If you're just drinking all the time, or you need to have 2 drinks to go on, like wait till you get to that college gig that doesn't have a bar there and you can't get the 2 drinks, or you're trying out for Last Comic Standing and they're not going to let you have 2 drinks in line while you're waiting to try out, I remember I tried out with a buddy of mine in San Antonio, and he had like a little water bottle full with vodka, and he's like, I need this. And I was like, oh, that's a joke right there. Like he had to have a little sip of alcohol before he went on to audition for Last Comic Standing. So it's kind of funny. So I'd say get past those crutches, like anything that it is like has to do with drinking and alcohol, and then you won't get arrested as much. Like all my arrest stories pretty much started with drugs and alcohol. So that's the best advice I could give is be careful with that. And then if you do make mistakes, own them, be honest about it, and move forward and become a better person.
Mm-hmm. It can be material.
And let the other guy drive, especially if he hasn't had anything to drink. Yes, let him drive.
That's so funny to me that you were like, no, I got this. And then that's the time when, oh, yeah, gosh. Yeah, it's like, I don't got this. That's great advice. There's a difference between punching down on yourself on the stuff that you've done and joking about your own mistakes, but kind of using that as like a growth, like a stepping stone, essentially. Like that's how I look at a lot of the mistakes that I make. It's all opportunity for growth. Cool, Gabe. Thanks for being on the podcast. Where can we find you? This is the part where you plug stuff.
You can find me online, everything Gabe Kea. On Instagram, I'm Abe Lincoln T-shirt. That's my handle on Instagram. My website, gabekea.com, should be the first thing that comes up when you Google my name. KeaGabekea. And buy my album or just stream it on Spotify. I've got some tracks that got picked up by Sirius XM, so that's good news. Super, super excited about that. Super excited about the album. It was so much hard work from so many people in Cincinnati, from Chris Weir to Clinton Jacob to Ross Duncliffe to so many people helped me mix the sound, do the artwork, come up with all the tags, write my own material, help me steal it from other comedians. No, I'm just kidding. But thank you so
tags,
much,
man.
Yeah, dumber than a fish, tagged by Robert Hawkins, one of the best. That's his tag right there, dumber than a fish. It's one of the opening jokes in the album. So check out the album on all the formats, and that's it. Thank you so much,
man. Absolutely.
All right,
man. It's great meeting you.
Yeah, Steve, Dave, thanks so much, both you guys.
Hey, thanks for being part of the show, man. Anytime you're up in Cleveland, holler at us.
Oh yeah, man.
I will, for sure.
So the next time you see those red and blue lights flashing in your rearview mirror, the next time they finally find that body in your backyard, remember that with a little bit of perspective, looking at it in hindsight,
Through the rear view mirror.
Looking at it through the rear view mirror with a little bit of perspective as you're walking away in handcuffs, give that guy a little smile, because you can laugh at that.
You can't laugh at that.
Special thanks to Golden Ox Studio. You can find Golden Ox Studio for all your podcasting needs at goldenoxstudio.com. Hit up Jeremy. He is fantastic to work with, a professional. He makes podcasting easy. And if you've been kicking the tires on starting your own podcast, definitely give Golden Ox Studio a look.
If you'd like to weigh in on today's topic, follow us on Twitter at YouCan'tLaughPod, or like us on Facebook at You Can't Laugh at That, and tell us how you did laugh at today's topic, or how you didn't. This is all about the conversation, is what I'm saying. All right, bye.